back to the channel, everyone. Well, we're finally here. Part 7 in our series where we complete the rebuild of our 1997 Polaris XLT. In this episode, we're going to install the carburetors, get them synced and tuned properly, and start the snowmobile for the first time in preparation for its maiden voyage this coming weekend. So stay tuned, and as always, if you're enjoying the content, please subscribe to the channel, and we'd love to see your comments and feedback. Before we install the carburetors, we want to revisit the issue related to the oil pump alignment marks. So as you see, the oil pump arms here and the oil pump bodies there. As we increase throttle or engine RPMs, the flow of oil out of the oil pump increases to make sure that we maintain that 50-to-1 ratio. So one of the things that we found since our last video we learned is that we want to align the first alignment mark on the oil pump with the mark on the engine block itself. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then the second thing, which is very important to do, is actually more important, is when you go to wide open throttle, you want to make sure that that second mark is aligned. Because that's where if you start your engine in for oil, you're in trouble. So I'm going to go ahead and make the adjustments, and then we'll move on to the next thing I like to do when installing the carburetors is install the choke cable. I find it's easier to do that. You need to tighten it with a wrench, and there's just more room to do that outside of the machine than there is in it. So that screws in with a 12mm wrench, or tightens with a 12mm wrench. So I'm going to do that for all three, and then we'll move on to the next step. So with the carburetors installed, we're focusing first on adjusting the free play in the choke cables. So there's a specification in the manual that shows you how much play they'd like to have in this choke cable. And you do that by adjusting the choke cables on the carburetors. So I'll show you those adjusters. So here we're looking at the top of the motor. All three carburetors are in, and so now we're going to zoom in on the choke adjusters. So the choke adjusters are right here. With the choke off, loosen the lock nut on the choke cable of each of the carburetors. Then focusing on one carburetor, turn the cable clockwise until there's a 1/4 inch or more of free play in the choke cable. Then from there, turn it counterclockwise until there's 0 free play. Then from there, turn it back one more time to clockwise until there's an 1/8 or a 1/4 inch of free play. Then tighten the lock nut and repeat for the remaining carburetors. To confirm that you adjusted it correctly, when you start the snowmobile, confirm that the choke works in its full on position, its half on position, and it turns off completely. The final thing we need to do prior to running our snowmobile is to set our carburetors so that they are working in unison, and we need to set the idle speed. To do this, we'll be using a procedure from the Polaris manual, where drill bits are used as gauges to make the adjustments. We'll be working with the throttle cables on top of each of the carbs to get them working in unison. Turning the throttle cable in or out moves the slides up or down and thereby adjusts the throttle gap. Note, before making any of the adjustments, make sure that the throttle cable junction block is held in the correct position, which I've already done. Now, consult the chart in your manual and select the correct drill bit to set the throttle gap. For my machine, it's a number 19 bit or 5/32. Adjust the throttle cable so the drill bit moves in and out of the cutaway with a slight drag. Repeat this process on all three carbs. Once this is complete, your carbs will be synced and working in unison. When the adjustments are complete, tighten the lock nuts on each of the throttle cables. With the carbs now set to work in unison, the final thing we need to do is to set the idle speed. To do that, we're going to insert our 3/16 bit into the throat of our carburetor and adjust the idle speed screw on the side until the bit moves in and out with a slight drag. Repeat for all three carburetors. Once you've adjusted all three, your idle speed now should be set. Now it's time to pump some air into our fuel tank to get some fuel into the carburetors and start our machine. good news is that the XLT started right up after a couple of pulls. I accidentally left the choke set on the half choke position, which made it sound much more boggy than it actually was. And I actually stalled out the machine, as you can see here. Once I fixed that, however, the snowmobile began to run much better. I did make one final tweak and increase the idle speed slightly by turning the idle screws in each of the carburetors by about a quarter of a turn. And here you can see when I've got the machine back together, it is running perfectly. We couldn't be any more excited about how well this project turned out. We put about 150 miles on the XLT on its maiden voyage weekend, and it did not skip a beat. It ran great. And frankly, it can keep up with just about anything that's out there today. I should mention that we did pre-mix 2 full tanks of fuel 50-to-1 with oil, along with the oil injection, to ensure that there was plenty of lube as the motor broke in. And frankly, I expected to foul plugs, and we didn't foul any. And I think going forward, we'll end up probably doing a little bit of pre-mix with every tank just to ensure we don't have to rebuild it again. We've had a great time doing this series and hope you have enjoyed it too.